This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Blissed? Dr. Shealy, are you blissed?
Have you ever seen me when I wasn't?
No, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here at the farm
in July.
Yeah, on the 6th of July. Yeah, Dr. Shealy, I have never seen you unblissed. Ever. Never. Not even the first time I met you years ago, you were blissed. Yep. Okay, your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're here. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, Studio A. And there's a link to all of your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com. Podcasts are free. Converging threats are confronted daily by your instructors. I'm Vincent Finelli. Aaron is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Dr. Norman Shealy's with us. Dr. Shealy, I just want to mention something. At the top of the hour news, there was a report of a woman who was injured when a saw blade flew 100 feet through the air in New York and cut her. And what I'd like to mention, I have in my hands a high-speed cutting disc. It's it can be used for concrete or sharpening a chainsaw chain. And what I've noticed is we are now experiencing the high cost of cheap products. And when I say cheap, I don't mean necessarily inexpensive. I mean inferior products. My son was using this sharpening stone on the chainsaw, and he touched the wheel to the chain, and the wheel shattered and flew through the air, very much like I'm imagining this saw blade flying through the air in New York and injuring a woman. So I take exception to the fact that our politicians have engineered a system whereby we don't make quality things in this country anymore. We just don't. And
well, I agree, and I would give you 10-to-1 odds it was made in China.
Yeah, and that's where this disc is that I have in my hands, and you can't get them anyplace else. We don't make those darn things here. We have shipped those jobs offshore because I guess it's below our dignity, if you will. We don't have people who would stoop it to the levels of making quality products in this country. So we import inferior products from China. And in that light, Dr. Shealy, I was over the Memorial Day weekend, I was working on the farm, and I connected an air hose to our compressor that's in the garage. And it's one of these large compressors and has these quick disconnect fittings like you might see at a gas station air hose. And you can't buy products for the couplings and American-made products either. And they've got these sharp edges. And I pinched my thumb and ripped off some skin on my thumb. And it wasn't that I really cut myself badly, but I was bleeding like crazy, and I needed to fix the backhoe. We're putting a shuttle, which is like a transmission, in the backhoe, and I really didn't want oil to get in this cut. Anyway, I put some Nixol on it. I'm sorry, not Nixol, Cayenne Nitro Extreme. I put a drop on my cut, put a Band-Aid on it, and it healed very, very quickly. So I want to share that with you.
There's no question this is the second or third that I remember wound that you've used it on with great success.
I've got to carry it around in my pocket. I keep banging myself up. And I do. I have this little tiny, let's see, how big is this bottle? It's it's like a half an ounce or so. Anyway, I keep that with me in my pocket. It's a little tiny squeeze bottle. But anyway, Dr. Shealy, it's great to have you back.
Great
and I have in my hands your picture. And you are grinning from ear to ear. and it's on the cover of your latest book. It says, C. Norman Shealy, MD, PhD, best-selling author of 90 Days to Self-Health, Living Bliss, Major Discoveries Along the Holistic Path. Thanks so much for sending this to me. And I started reading it, and it's great. It's an easy read, and you talk about conscientiousness, don't you?
Oh, yes. Well, that is, as you know, the most essential element for health and longevity.
Dr. Shealy, you talk about, in the early pages of the book, you talk about the 30,000 patients whom you have seen, and you talk about how when they'd come into your clinic, they were suffering chronic pain, they were hunched over, and you also talk about something that we talk about here on the broadcast. You know, is it possible to be happy when you're not well, when you're sick, and is it possible to be happy when you're in pain? And you talk about the companion of chronic pain, which is depression.
Well, they go together. And interestingly, of course, many of the chronic pain invalids actually had depression before they developed something that led to chronic pain.
I'm thinking about that, Dr. Shealy. Are you saying that there's a cause and effect there, that people who are depressed then end up with pain? Their body
That's
falls
right.
apart?
Statistically speaking, those people who've been, low-grade depressed or more all of their lives are much more likely to wind up with chronic pain when they have an injury or surgery.
So depression, are we saying, it leads up to illness, sickness?
Yeah, depression means that many people just, don't know how to cope when they have an injury or surgery, and so they're much more likely to wind up with serious problems.
Dr. Shealy, I met a woman in Indiana, and I was at an event, a farmers type event, and John Dollarheight and I were talking with this woman about some of the things that have happened with 9/11, and we were talking about conspiracy fact and those kinds of things. And this woman raised her hands in the surrender position and backed away from me and John Dollarheight, and she said, I just can't handle all that. I can't think about all that. It's too much. How is it possible that a person can't digest and understand information and goes into panic mode? What is it that causes that, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I think it
doesn't happen to me. It absolutely does not happen to me.
Well, I've met your mother, and that's why.
Okay.
I'm not being facetious. When a child feels, doesn't matter what happened, of course, when a child feels unwanted or unnurtured during early childhood, they don't make oxytocin adequately. Oxytocin is the normal nurturing bonding hormone. And so if you don't feel that you were wanted, if you feel abandoned or abused, then you don't make oxytocin, which is the natural, hey, I feel okay, I'm okay. And then any kind of psychological or physical or chemical insult can lead to big problems.
Does this also happen with animals like cats, dogs, cows, horses?
Oh, yes. I think it can. I'm sure it can. The interesting in general about an animal is they will respond faster to a true, kind, loving human taking them over, taking care of them, than a child.
We have a calf that was born about 3.5 months ago, and it was during the winter, and his mama didn't quite understand that she was supposed to take care of him. So we did, and we hugged him, and we brought him right over to the house immediately because he wasn't going to be fed by his mama. And so we bottle fed him, and we hugged him, and we talked to him, and so here we have a cow that's walking around free in the yard, and he could just walk off if he wanted to. But he's out there with the dogs, he's out there with the cats and the chickens, and he actually thinks he's part of the family. And we have a rug that you wipe your feet on right outside the kitchen door, and that is like the spot. That's like the best spot for any of the animals to lie down. And he takes that spot first, and the dogs can't get on it because he gets on it. And so he has become a member of the family. And he's 300 pounds right now, and so he's a pretty big boy. He doesn't beat up the other animals. He gets along with them just fine. And over the weekend, I was working with our son on the power shuttle of a backhoe, and it's a real heavy thing. And so we're on our backs, and we're working on this heavy. It's like putting a transmission in a car. And so the calf was there, and he's kind of nibbling on us, and he's hanging around. And he's just there. The dogs, everybody's watching, and they're all kind of gathered around. And that's why I asked if this transfers to humans and animals as well.
Yeah,
because
again,
I see it.
If it happens early in life, the rejection, abandonment can be overcome. Now, if it happens a lot later, in a child that's after age 7, they may never recover.
And that was my next question. In the example that I gave of this woman who could not cope with, too much information, too many facts to think about, is it possible for her to do something to get to the point where she's like the rest of us, where we can handle an overload of information, or an information overload or so much information that might overload some people?
Coming after this brief break.
Yeah. Yeah, after this brief commercial announcement, Dr. Norman Shealy and I will be right back, and we'll talk more about his latest book, Living Bliss, and you can get it, and it's on page 1 of the website, usaprepares.com. We'll be right back. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, and, it's in the book, class, it's in the book, Living Bliss by Dr. Norman Shealy. So we've been talking about what can we do to overcome the anxiety of information overload, or something like that. Dr. Shealy?
Well, at the top of my list would be Air Bliss. Now, it, quote, only works in 80% of people. But that's not bad. I don't know a drug that comes close to that.
You want to share with our radio class what you saw with Bliss with me and how it's helped me? Seriously.
Well, you are one of the exceptions.
You can say it, Dr. Shealy. Go ahead.
You are one of the
you
exceptionally...
go all the way back.
Hello?
Yes. Dr. Shealy, what I was thinking is that first day that you decided I needed Bliss, when I was in a local radio station where I followed your broadcast.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. You're so sensitive to it that you're the only person I know who can practically just sniff it and relax and go into bliss. Most people, it takes at least 30 seconds.
Yeah, but what I'm alluding to is I was really, really, really nervous, and about getting behind the microphone, and for example, John Moore is a friend of ours, and he's been at all of our expos, and he would invite me to talk about the expo on his broadcast, and I'd have about 2 weeks' notice, and he'd say, "Okay, Vinny, in 2 weeks you can come on my show." And for 2 weeks, I would be, thinking and jotting down notes and preparing and practicing and being nervous, like for 2 weeks, for the entire time before the broadcast. And then it was like that when I did a 1 hour a week broadcast. I was thinking about the next broadcast all week. And then when I did 1 hour a day, it was like nonstop, constant anxiety about being behind the microphone. And you solved that virtually, instantly. And you recognized that. And we really didn't even know each other. And well, you saw it from 100 feet away.
Exactly. And it really does work well. You know, my favorite story is a 12-year-old young man who had autism. And his parents brought him to see me. I couldn't get within 3 feet of the kid. He was so withdrawn. He didn't want, to be touched or, hardly to talk to. And interestingly, with a lot of convincing, he went home and did it. And 2 months later, at the expo, the first expo that I was at, he came up and hugged me.
Isn't that neat?
Bliss.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And the kind of
do you
experience.
have, how about post-traumatic stress disorder, Dr. Shealy?
My
What are
favorite
your
story
thoughts on
there
that?
is a veteran who had 10 years of very severe post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares every night of his life. The first night he used Bliss, he slept through the night without a nightmare. It'll be 2 years in July, and I hear from him quite regularly. I've been giving him the Bliss oils ever since then. He has, after 10 years, been able to get rid of his nightmares, and I mean, it's phenomenal.
Dr. Shealy, when I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, I heard a different term. I didn't hear about post-traumatic stress. What I heard the term was shell shock.
Of course. Same thing.
And that was, yes. And that was the term, class, that GIs would use when they talked about the guys who couldn't handle being shot at, being bombed, the cannons blasting, those kinds of things, the strafing of the from aircraft, or the dive bombing of the kamikazes, those kinds of experiences caused people to have shell shock. And today, I mean, there are horrors, and today, I think back about my dad, who had nightmares probably every day since the Japanese dive bombed the troop ships that he was on going to the Philippines. And he'd wake up screaming at night with nightmares. And I'll share the rest of the story with you right after this break about a man I met on the telephone who was also experiencing nightmares from World War II, who didn't meet my dad. And let's talk about how this can be overcome with Dr. Norman Shealy. Dr. Shealy's with us. Dr. Shealy, on January 4th, I made a call to a man in Kansas. His name is Kenneth Knudsen. He's a World War II veteran, 88 years old. And he was jailed the day after Christmas 2013 because he couldn't afford to make repairs on his building, his store in Kansas. And so he was fined $500, and then he was hauled into court, and they said, hey, we find you and you haven't fixed your building. If you don't fix your building, you're going to jail. And they arrested him. They arrested him and put him in jail for failure to repair his building. Well, I saw this story, and I just reposted it to the top of page 1 at USA Prepares if you'd like to see the story I'm talking about. See the picture of the building. It has a brick wall in the back, and it's cracked, and he didn't fix it because he couldn't afford to. Anyway, I was talking with this man. I said, would you like me to call City Hall? Is there anything that I can do to help you? I'd be glad to try. And he said, I really appreciate it. But no, thanks anyway. So we talked for about a half hour, and I asked him about World War II because he is a veteran. And I asked him if he was in the Pacific, and he said yes. And I asked him if he was on the flotilla toward the Philippines, and he said yes. And I asked him if he was dive bombed by the kamikaze Japanese aircraft, and he said yes. And then out of the blue, I said, Kenneth, do you have nightmares? And he said, almost every day. And so I told him about my dad, and I said, and so my dad was there, and he was dive bombed, and the ships were on fire, and men were jumping into the water because the men were on fire, and the jet fuel. I'm sorry, the gasoline fuel was on their bodies, and they were on fire, and to put themselves out, they jumped into the Pacific. And he had the same nightmares that my dad did. And I asked him if he knew others. And he said yes. So this post-traumatic stress, these nightmares from the horrors of war are not all that unusual as far as I can tell.
Oh, no.
And I have 2 bottles of Bliss here. I'm going to send him one. I'm going to give him a call after the broadcast and see if he'd like me to send him one of my 2. And maybe, do you think it would help him, Dr. Shealy?
Well, it's certainly worth trying. Again, I think there's an 80% chance it will help. Mm-hmm. Nothing. I often say we have to go to the Supreme Court to decide whether you're dead or alive.
Yeah.
Nothing is 100%. But 80% is not bad, and it's safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, this man is so nice, and he's so humble, and if I can, I would like to give him a call and ship this to him if he'd like it. But so I'm going to do that. So I wanted to share with you that the little bit of experience I've had with people who are veterans, and they're so quiet about this, Dr. Shealy. Well, let me ask you this: is it better if they were to talk about some of the horrors of war? Because I remember,
it can help, but my experience is that often it just reinforces the problem. And that conventional psychotherapy, which is talk therapy, really is not what I consider great therapy. You're far better. There are whole bunches of other alternatives for bringing things under control, like self-regulation, self-hypnosis, a more positive approach than talking about it.
Okay, let's talk about that. So when someone goes to a therapist, it's okay. Tell me what happened. How do you feel about that? What? I mean, isn't that what it is? It's tell me more. And what makes you say that? I see. Yes. And tell me more. And that's an hour goes by, and that's all it is, right?
Exactly. I sometimes call it wallowing in your manure.
Right. And so what is the approach? So what would you suggest that we do, Dr. Shealy?
Well, there are a number of things. Most people who have had that kind of trauma are deficient in taurine, the essential amino acid. Most of them are deficient in magnesium. So those 2 nutrients can help. And I just learned something 2 days ago up in Canada. I have said for, 50 years, I suppose, that one of the great deficits in the vegetarian diet is a lack of taurine, the amino acid that stabilizes the electrical charge in our cells. In other words, it's a mild sedative, normal to cells. And there is no taurine in vegetable matter. Well, I've had to change my mind. There is now one, and the only one that I've been able to find in all these years, and that is hemp hearts. It's really hemp seed that has been shelled, essentially. The coating has been taken off. And hemp hearts are 33% protein, which is by far the highest known protein in any vegetable matter, but they even have taurine. In fact, I'm writing a little email newsletter on it soon called Vegetarian Bliss, because as you know, I'm not a vegetarian enthusiast, but at least they can now get that very essential amino acid.
Dr. Shealy, I'm glad you mentioned hemp, and I'll tell you why. I've received a number of calls about hemp and the use of hemp for health. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was stunned because I had not found anything on real health benefits. Now, hemp oil has been said to be very good for your face and skin and that sort of thing, and there's some evidence to support that. But more important is this phenomenal protein content. Your average vegetable protein is an incomplete protein, first of all. Most of them don't contain all the essential amino acids. The exceptions for all of the absolute essential amino acids are chia seeds, particularly, which has 19 to 21% protein. But here we are with hemp seed having 33% protein. I mean, that's darn near as good as beef. And it's got some
And do you think?
I'm sorry?
Do you think that that may be why it is banned in this country?
Well, if it's government, it's stupid. You remember, it's the economy stupid. Well, if it's government, it's stupid. I haven't seen anything that the government has done well.
I haven't either, and there is a video series on Netflix, and I don't watch television, but I have watched a few episodes of this, and it's called House of Cards. It's a little vulgar. There's a little bit of nudity in it, and I don't think it's necessary at all, either one of those things. However, it seemed, I've told our family that I think it's a documentary on the political system, and it shows the corruption, the individual greed, the me first tactics that are used by politicians and Congress. I mean, it is absolutely alarming. The drug abuse, the drug addictions, the vices that this blight on the United States of America, I'm talking about Congress, that they have, how they're act above the law. And you're absolutely right. And these are people whose lives are in absolute shambles, and they're telling us what to do.
Oh yeah, well,
you're absolutely right.
One of my favorite stories is about Al Quie, Quie. Al was a congressman from Minnesota for 22 years. And he happened to be a friend of ours. He was a great horseman. And in about 1980 or 81, Al quit after 22 years because he said, I just cannot find enough honest people in Congress that I'm willing to continue. He went back, was governor of Minnesota after that. This guy could have stayed in office for life. So as early as, 35 years ago, he already found that Congress was dishonest. Not even 10% he found adequately honest that he was willing to stay in Congress.
And I can understand that, Dr. Shealy. Imagine working in a corporation where 9 out of 10 people you can't stand because their values are different from yours. I mean, what would you do? I mean, how would you get along with those people? It's impossible.
Yeah,
it's impossible to get to.
You'd want to become a hermit.
To work in an organization. Yes, yeah, and that's not what people are like. And that brings up my next question: living with animals. So here at the farm, Dr. Shealy, we have cats. We have 5 cats. We have 5 dogs. And we've got I think 6 chickens, and they hang around. And the chickens poop on the veranda, and we have to hose that off, and it's kind of a nuisance. But they're kind of nice to have because they do a great job of eating the bugs, and so everybody here on the farm has a job. And now the cats come inside and they go outside, and the dogs come inside and they go outside. The chickens we don't let inside. The
right.
calf we don't let inside, but he walks in the garage.
They're not easily house trained.
Right, they're not right. But now here's the question. Now we have had guests over at the farm who probably think that they really haven't said it, but I think they think, are you kidding? You're letting that dog in the house? And that other dog? And that other dog? And those 2 others? And the cats? Now, I understand that they, walk around in the grass and the dirt and they bring in some microbes and so forth. But are we better off living with animals? Now, I'm not talking about having the animals sleep on the bed. I'm not talking about that. But I mean, we have the dogs in the house, and they have free reign of the house where they are on patrol 24/7. As our security system, as our protectors. Are we okay with having animals in the house? The cost benefit trade off there?
Oh, absolutely. absolutely. You know, the
in terms
evidence
of health?
is overwhelming that children who are raised with a cat or a dog have much lower incidence of asthma.
Interesting. And I remember back in the 60s, doctors saying, oh, get the cats out of the house, you know, will cause an asthma attack or wheezing or so forth. Interesting. Dr. Norman Shealy and I will be right back. His new book, Living Bliss, Major Discoveries Along the Holistic Path. And if you're interested in getting it, usaprepares.com, page 1, there's a link that'll take you right to his website. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, and we're talking about his book, Living Bliss. And in class, seriously, when I started broadcasting, you know, I don't know what happened, class, but I just got disconnected. And I was talking about Dr. Shealy's latest book, Living Bliss, and Dr. Shealy, talk about how your patients who would come to your clinic would be addicted to the pharmacological drugs. Absolutely addicted.
Well, you
Can
know,
you tell
the
us about
interesting is addicted to, in those days it was mostly Percodan and Valium, and yet they still were highly depressed and in severe pain. One man was taking 60 milligrams of morphine every 2.5 hours and still had severe pain. Actually, it took me 3 weeks to get him weaned off it, and his pain was decreased 50% just by coming off the nonsense.
Dr. Shealy, when someone is on a drug such as morphine, doesn't that affect the entire body?
Oh, of course.
And so
it's a toxin. It's a low-grade toxin.
And why is it prescribed? Isn't there an alternative that Western medicine knows about?
Well, Western medicine refuses even to look at most alternatives because most physicians have been so brainwashed by the pharmacomafia that they won't even look at alternatives.
Dr. Shealy, when I visit my general practitioner once a year, if I remember, and I don't remember all that well. I really don't, because I'm trying to think. The last time I went there was probably a couple of years ago, and I noticed that there are some well-dressed. They look like salespeople, you know, waiting with these suitcases of samples and propaganda. And they look very, very well dressed. They look very well educated. They look like they are high-end salespeople. And you know, my guess is that they're there waiting for me to get out of there so that they can hawk their wares to the physician.
With a few little gifts of various and sundry kinds, of course. They spend a few $1 billion brainwashing physicians that way as well as all the others.
Dr. Shealy, can you share with us the underbelly of that? When you talk about the gifts, what are we talking about? I mean, I see the pens.
Well, free conferences, free lunches, you know, little goodies.
Let's talk about that when we come back. Let's talk about, well, I guess it would be the bribing of the medical profession, isn't it? Dr. Norman Shealy is with us. His latest book, Living Bliss, Major Discoveries Along the Holistic Path. See Norman Shealy, MD, PhD. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, blissed. Hour number 2 of usaprepares.com. Dr. Norman Shealy's with us. Dr. Shealy, during the break, I just did a search on the internet, and I just typed in bribing doctors. There it is. Top post. GlaxoSmithKline faces criminal investigation by fraud office. Why? Well, they were allegedly involved in bribing doctors in Poland, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and China. You know, just to name a few. So, Dr. Shealy, can you share with us what you'd like about maybe a little bit of the underbelly of the medical profession and how we've become so addicted to these drugs and why doctors are prescribing them and why, and maybe even why, you know, when we go to visit our doctor and he says, you know what, I think look, let's give it 3 days. and I'm pretty sure you're going to be fine. We're not going to give you any meds. Just drink plenty of water, get some rest, eat some good nutritious food, and I think you're going to be okay. We don't feel comfortable. Hey, doc, really, you're not going to give me any chemicals? Come on. Why is it that how is it that we got to this point, Dr. Shealy? Is it the bribes, and how is it done?
Well, it's all the way. Actually, of course, I lay it at the door of the FDA, the Federal Danger Administration,
mm-hmm.
also known as the Federal Drug Administration, and in my opinion, somewhat more dangerous than the KGB of Russia in the old days.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, over the last 50 years, gradually the FDA has just become a pawn for the pharmacomafia. And among other things, they allow advertising of very serious drugs on television, urging people to, ask your doctor. Well, the doctor's not smart enough to know half the time. But then that's where the pimps that go to their offices come from. Of course, I had a rule of, they didn't come to my office because I didn't allow them. But basically, it goes to the entire medical profession, starting at the top. The journals, the medical journals, like the JAMA, the New England Journal, ads. Well, when you see an ad in the major journal of a society like the American Medical Association, it implies that it's okay. In fact,
Absolutely.
that it's even being recommended by the American Medical Association, which it almost is. And personally, I don't think they should be allowed to advertise even in medical journals, because doctors get fooled into thinking it's okay. And now, today, a huge amount of the actual basic research done is funded by the pharmacomafia. And my favorite story, of course, is about antidepressant drugs. There are several major articles, including one in the New England Journal of Medicine, which state that if the negative result studies had been, quote, allowed to be published, the net published work on antidepressants would say zero effect. But 75% of the negative outcome studies were never allowed to be published. And since they paid for them, they can prevent them from being published. So I wouldn't trust the drug industry to tell me the time of day.
Yeah. That was what I was afraid the answer was going to be, Dr. Shealy, because I know so many people that my mother sees at the senior center right here in our little hamlet in Missouri, who are on so many medications. I mean, 8, 9, 10 prescriptions that they take daily. And don't these prescriptions interact with each other? Don't we take one prescription to counteract some of the symptoms and the effects and the causes of other medications?
It is an ever-increasing problem, unequivocally a huge, huge problem, Vince. There's no such thing as a side effect, by the way. It's a complication.
Right,
Dizziness,
right.
nausea, diarrhea, constipation, confusion, high blood pressure, low blood pressure occasionally. All of these things, that's not a side effect. It's an effect.
When you say, Dr. Shealy, when you say dizziness, if the doctor says, well, you may experience some dizziness, that ought to be a warning sign of the highest order. Dizziness?
And yet it's looked upon as, just a little dizziness, dizziness enough to make you have a wreck, fall and hurt yourself, pass out, a few other little things like that.
Well, dizziness, it really sounds quite serious to me because the loss of coordination, motor skills, operating at less than 100% efficiency. That's what dizziness is, isn't it?
Absolutely. But
so,
if it's called a side effect, people don't think it's real. My favorite statement: death is not a side effect.
Right. Well, if if we had some of these side effects as we were driving, if we just related side effects to our automobiles, they would be like dings, dents, crashes, scrapes, right?
Yeah.
Banged up front end, sides, quarter panels, broken windshields. That would be side effects.
Exactly.
And we wouldn't allow that. We wouldn't do that. We would say, well, are you kidding? Bang up my car? Are you kidding? But we're willing to do that to our bodies.
Yep. No, it isn't, by the way, I don't want people to get the idea that I don't think drugs are ever useful. I honestly believe that maybe 15% of the time, the right choice of drugs could save your life. But I also believe that conservatively, 70% of the time, drugs have very serious potential complications.
Dr. Shealy, we've received a number of requests during this broadcast, texts, emails, asking how do we get the copy of your book, Living Bliss. Now, here's what I've done. I've posted on the website, usaprepares.com, page 1, an overview of the book, Living Bliss. And by the way, that picture of you is outstanding.
and it was taken actually last July, so it is fairly recent.
Dr. Shealy has blue eyes. He's right on the front cover, and he looks absolutely great. If you want to see the epitome of health at 80-plus years old, it's right on the cover of his latest book, Living Bliss. Okay, so how do we get it, Dr. Shealy, and what does it cost?
Well, the official cost is $10.95. However, it's not out officially until the 5th of June, which is next week, and Amazon has it for 39% off. And, of course, they can order it through USA Prepares. They can go to my website, normshealy.com, and order it there. If they want me to autograph it, all they got to do is ask. But I really do think it is by far the most important book that I've written.
Dr. Shealy, I have a dilemma. And I have my class, my book says on the inside cover, it says, for Vince, my blissful friend, hugs, Norm. And and thank you so much for that, Dr. Shealy. And here's my dilemma. There's so many important parts of this book that I would like to highlight. But I don't want to highlight it because it's a great book.
Well,
That's a dilemma.
One of the reasons I like real books and don't have and don't plan ever getting Kindle is I do like to mark in them. I even turn down a corner of a page sometimes so I can find something quickly. I mean, that just means to me it's well loved and used.
Okay, you just solved that problem for me. So I can, as I go through the broadcast, I have some topics that I want to remind myself of, that some of my questions my questions and questions that have been sent in by our class, and I use a highlighter, and I've got different color pens so I can keep track of where I am and those kinds of things. So okay, it will have some yellow highlighting in the book, and I suggest you consider this class, Living Bliss. This is not a commercial. This is an endorsement, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's an easy read. So Living Bliss, you can go to usaprepares.com. Now, we don't sell anything, but what we do, and maybe we should start doing that, but what we do is we point to where you can get it. So if you go to page 1 of USA Prepares, it'll take you, there's a link that says if you'd like to buy the book, click here. That'll take you right over to Dr. Shealy's website where you can order it directly from him, or you can go to Amazon.com. But I suggest that you consider asking Dr. Shealy to inscribe yours for you, because those are the most valuable possessions that I have. The books from our friends that I keep in the studio with me, very close to me, that are inscribed and autographed. I really love them. So, and I know you will too. Dr. Shealy, with the cost of modern medicine, if you will, I decided to ask a hospital for what is their procedure for helping people who just can't afford the $18 aspirins and the $500 Band-Aids and whatever else they charge for. So I asked them to send me in the mail what they request for assistance. Well, I have a 1, 2, 3, 4-page document, 5-page document. And here's the information that they would like. So It says, in order to accurately assess your financial situation and provide you with the best possible assistance, the following items are required. Now get this. Complete the attached financial assistance application. Attach a copy of your current tax return with all schedules. Attach a copy of your most recent personal property tax receipts. Assessment for home and vehicles. Attach a copy of your valid driver's license, state identification, or other valid form of identification with a photo verification included. Copies of your last 60 days pay stubs for each household member that is 18 or older. Include interest, salary, rent, alimony, pensions, disability, social security, unemployment, child support, workers' compensation, public assistance, and other documentation from income sources. We'll be right back. So to continue with this little list of financial assistance, the application requirements, they want, this is Mercy, and there's no mercy in Mercy. That's Mercy Healthcare in the Springfield, Missouri area. So what they also want is copies of the last 60 days pay stubs for each household member that is 18 or older, and they want to know the interest, the salary, the rent, the alimony, the pensions, the disability, social security, unemployment, child support, workers' compensation, public assistance, and other written documentation from income sources. They want the last 3 bank or credit union statements, checking, savings, money market, the copy of the last 2 months' mortgage and rent payments, and other. I mean, this is like a week's worth of documentation that they want in order to apply for financial assistance. Dr. Shealy, what I'm saying is I believe that the medical industry, if you will, is in bed with the data collectors and the government to build dossiers of ever-expanding size and scope about who we are.
You know, Vince, have I ever sent you a copy of third-party rape?
Yes, you have. I have it right here in the studio.
Well, 22 years ago, I talked about the collusion, the conspiracy between government, the insurance mafia, the legal profession, and hospitals. And, of course, all of them are in collusion with the pharmacomafia.
And that is exactly right. And you are way, way, way ahead of the curve in reporting this. And, I think, Dr. Shealy, the term third-party rape may make people think that it's about something other than what it is. But it is about how the medical industry, which was at one time, I believe, the finest in the world, has been taken over and corrupted by the insurance industry. Am I right on that?
Well, yes. In order actually to do it, however, it had the complicity and encouragement of the government. I mean, look, one of the most stupid things about Obamacare is having all the for-profit insurance companies in charge of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is absolute proof that the government is in bed with major corporations. Absolute proof. Here's another, just a very simple, small piece of the puzzle. There used to be this program, and when the government has a program, it really means someone's going to get taken advantage of, and that would be us, we the people. They had a program called Cash for Clunkers. It's the dumbest idea on the planet. Take your car and trade it into your dealer, and they will crush it, and they'll give you money in order to crush your car. Now, they could have taken that vehicle and salvaged used parts off it, alternators, batteries, seats, window glass. No. They would crush that car, and the government would pay you for it, and you'd have to buy a new car. You'd have to buy a new, more fuel-efficient car. And I don't believe that we would ever overcome the destruction to the environment by creating a new car and destroying an old car and not salvaging the parts, the alternators, the starters, all of the devices that can be removed and sold on the used parts market. No, we destroyed them, and that was at the hands of the United States government. That's just one little piece. Dr. Shealy, I want to share the story. I wrote it late last night, about midnight. There was an explosion at Prairie State Energy Campus in Washington County, Illinois. We broke the story. We have a picture of the explosion, and this is a location where we generate electricity from coal and use steam, high pressure superheated steam, to create electricity. And this facility mines about 7 million tons of coal annually. So the mine is on the campus where the power generation equipment is. And there's a picture of the explosion and the damage to the building. It's at usaprepares.com. So they use supercritical fluid, which is really very, very high temperature and high pressure water vapor. Well, it's not even vapor, it's beyond that, to generate electricity. If you want to see what that's like, that story was, the exclusive story is at usaprepares.com. That power generation system, unit number 2, is taken out of service right now. And it will probably be out of service for a year while they figure out what happened and how to fix it. Dr. Norman Shealy and I are talking about living bliss. We'll be right back. Dr. Shealy's with us, and I've got his book, Living Bliss, in my hands. And on page 9, there's a section that talks about why should you strive to be conscientious. And it goes on to say, what is it that conscientious people care about, and why should you care? Well, these individuals are pretty easy to recognize. They're prepared, neat, and orderly. They like things scheduled, and they approach tasks in a focused, organized, and disciplined manner. Conscientious individuals are careful, thorough, reliable, persistent, and prudent. It may sound a bit boring to some of you, but these traits are all good to have if you want to have a long and healthy life. Conscientious people are particularly resilient when life gives them big challenges that must be faced. But the most critical aspect of conscientiousness is responsibility. They don't blame others for their own problems. Dr. Shealy, as I read that, it sounds like a lot of our friends, doesn't it?
You bet. You know, I don't know. Were you a Boy Scout, Vince?
Yes.
Okay. I have a feeling that boys who really were, who not only belonged but really worked at being a Boy Scout, would be almost always lifelong conscientious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and we were taught pretty much to be respectful, responsible, to leave wherever we were better than we found it, and that's something that I think is something we should all do. If somebody, like for example, if I needed to borrow a lawnmower, which would be very, very, very rare. I don't think I've ever borrowed anybody's lawnmower, but if I were in that position, I would make sure that it would be cleaner than when I borrowed it, and I'd probably do something like change the oil if it needed it, and say, when I return it, just want to let you know, here's the kind of oil I put in it. Not for a thank you, but just to leave it a little bit better than I found it. And I think that's what we should all strive to do, and to be mindful of that everywhere we go. As a matter of fact, when I go to a supermarket, I just don't leave the cart in the middle of the parking lot. I will bring the cart back to a better position, at least the same position as where I found that shopping cart. And I think it's important to do that. And if I see trash in a parking lot, I'll pick it up and I'll put it in my car, and then I'll dispose of it, with my trash.
Not only that, of course, this means, statistically speaking, you are going to be one of the healthiest, longest-lived people around.
and there's some great satisfaction in that, Dr.
Exactly.
Shealy, because we'll outlive politicians.
But, of course, that is why it's so important. You know, again, how long I live is not important, but being healthy until I drop is. And the two go together. Conscientious people are very much more healthy and live longer, far longer than non-conscientious people. To me, that's simple.
This reminds me of that story that I learned when I was studying management at the university, and they'd say, you know, you can tell a company that's doing really well by the noise in the cafeteria. You know, the louder the noise, the more fun people are having, the more they enjoy each other's company. You know, during the lunch hour, and you know, a somber, quiet, whispering kind of cafeteria lets you know that there are serious problems with that corporation. And I was thinking back to, you know, the events that you've had at your farm, and there's no whispering going on at your farm. Everybody's loud, and I don't mean out of control, but I mean happy, absolutely happy, having fun, and it doesn't matter who you sit next to, who you talk to. Everybody's fun, and because they're all of similar cloth. They all have that positive outlook. They all are conscientious. They're all people who enjoy life. And I'd like to see everybody live like that, Dr. Shealy.
I agree.
I really would.
If everybody lived like that, medical expenses would be cut 75%. That's simple. Medical expenses would be cut 75%.
There was a post on the internet, Dr. Shealy, about cancer. It's called the Cancer Class Divide. And it says affluent people are more likely to suffer skin and thyroid cancer, while poorer people fall victim to liver and cervical cancer. Does that jive with your experiences? Yes.
And, you know, again, it's what people do.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite quote, maybe, of all time, comes from an article published in the late 70s in the journal Daedalus, Daedulus, by John Knowles, called Responsibility of the Individual. And John, whom I knew, he trained at Mass General Hospital. He was a cardiologist, same time I did. He was president of Rockefeller Foundation. And he said, 99% of people are born healthy and become unhealthy because of human misbehavior. In other words, a huge majority of illnesses and premature death come because of human misbehavior. And now, it isn't all, by the way, individual personal misbehavior. The individual misbehaviors of smoking, obesity, eating junk and not eating adequate vegetables and fruits, and not exercising. Those are human, personal, irresponsible behaviors. And did you know that only 3% of Americans have those four habits? Only 3%. That means that 97% of people are partially to significantly irresponsible. So it means that only 3% of people are conscientious about their own health.
Dr. Shealy, is that... Where does that number come from, that 3%?
Well, there was a wonderful study about 7 or 8 years ago now, and they studied 160,000 people, broad study across the country. And I can assure you, since I lecture all over the country, virtually every time I give one of my workshops or lectures, I ask the population in the audience, which can vary from 100 to many hundreds, what percentage of you have these four habits? On average, all four habits, it's not more than 3%.
And the reason I asked you that, Dr. Shealy, is because that's the same exact number that I've come up with independently from you and from the study about the number of people who are preparedness-minded. And what I mean by that is not someone who's heard the term, not someone who knows someone who's heard the term, but someone who is actually preparing at some level that is significant. I think there's only 3%, and that is exactly the number that I've mentioned on the air, over the last couple of years. 3%. That's the number I've determined through my experiences.
Well,
through
I imagine it's the same 3%.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm wondering if it really is the same 3% of conscientious, minded people who exhibit the conscientious behavior that you're talking about. I think it's the same 3%. I really do. Well, now, and since we're talking about human misbehavior, there are two things that a person can do that I think are the highest order of misbehavior possible. One is murder, and the other is suicide. And the reason I'm mentioning this, Dr. Shealy, is I believe that the people who are involved in spraying chemicals in the atmosphere to manipulate the weather are involved in murder of we the people. They're killing animals, or executing animals slowly and executing plant life slowly. But they are involved in the destruction of the planet at the highest level of. I mean, what's more serious than destroying the planet? And those people, I believe, are involved in murder. But suicide, Dr. Shealy, is increasing, I believe, at an increasing rate. Is that just me thinking that? Because
no, it is. But to some extent, it's hard to separate that from the use of antidepressant drugs, because antidepressant drugs significantly increase the risk of suicide at all ages. At all ages. So here's something supposed to prevent or help people overcome depression, and it actually makes it worse enough that they commit suicide. Another of the reasons I think they suck. And of course, I'm being kind again.
Dr. Shealy, yes. In Northern Europe, there are countries who are saying that suicide is, it's okay, because if you're in chronic pain, well, you can just kill yourself, and we'll help you do that. And it's not against the law. Well, they're now saying that, well, you don't even have to be in this chronic pain, and you don't have to go before a panel or a committee or a review board in order to legally take your own life. So they're saying, what I'm saying, Dr. Shealy, is I believe that we are being desensitized toward the evil of suicide. I think we're being slowly turned into programming ourselves. Life's tough, the job's tough, the spouse is just not, boy, it's tough to live with that person. We can just end it, and we'll just take our lives, and everything will be just fine. I think it's nuts.
Of course, I consider that it's sad and it's wrong at the same time. And the people who encourage that, I think, are committing a crime.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You said it so eloquently. I believe that they are too. Just like the people who are spraying these chemtrails all over the United States are committing a crime of the highest order. I believe that people who are involved in assisting suicide are doing the same thing.
I agree.
And you talked about antidepressants. I know a man. I knew him. I knew a man who was on antidepressants. He was prescribed them by his doctor. He drove his vehicle to the top of a bridge, jumped off, lived, got all banged up. I mean, seriously banged up. And so they kept him on the antidepressants. And after he was all patched up, he hung himself in his basement. We'll be right back. Dr. Norman Shealy's with us, and we're talking about complications. And one of the complications that I see of antidepressants is suicide. And it's unacceptable. Dr. Shealy, when patients now go into doctor's offices and they are they have a visit with the nurse first, typically. The nurse will ask them some questions like, have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself? How about, do you feel like hurting others? And I'm wondering, Dr. Shealy, are these questions, which are required now by the government, the federal government, I wonder if these questions, the answers to which go into the database to see the correlation between antidepressants and thoughts of suicide. And I'm wondering if they're saying, wow, it's working great. It's really working. You know, we've got people who are saying they're taking these antidepressants and they want to hurt themselves and others. This is really working. I wonder, what do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, if the government's asking it, it's not good. It's that simple.
So what do we do, Dr. Shealy, if we have loved ones or we ourselves are on medications like antidepressants? What do you recommend that we do?
Well, of course, Air Bliss is simple, always worth a try. If that doesn't work, the next best is a Bliss electrical stimulator. Totally safe. I've used it in over 30,000 people. It's now sold as Fisher Wallace, Fisher, F-I-S-H-E-R hyphen Wallace. You can find it on the internet, and the company they bought the List patent when Saul List died, and I've checked it out. It really is his device, and they are much better. They actually will give you access to a physician to get you the prescription if you need it. Those two things are at the top of my list. There are a number of other things. People go to my website, look in links, and under Optimal Health, in the links on my website, I have a whole bunch of other excellent, safe alternatives for treating depression well.
We're talking about, if you'd like to go to the website, class, normshealy.com, N-O-R-M, as in Norman, Shealy, S-H-E-A-L-Y.com, normshealy.com, and you can go to Optimal Health, and it's absolutely free. And if you'd like a copy of his newsletter, just go to normshealy.com, the same website, and you can click on the part to get the newsletter. You'll need to enter your email address. It does not get sold. It doesn't get reported. Nobody's tracking you. It's just used to make sure that you get your multi-time per week newsletter. I get it right here at usaprepares.com, the same one you get, and you get it the same time I do. So if you're interested in a free newsletter, normshealy.com. Dr. Shealy, cravings. We only have a really short time left. What do cravings mean? Like sometimes when women are pregnant, they will crave ice cream and pickles. Is there any...
It's some kind of deficiency. You know, most of the time it's some kind of nutritional deficiency. And even in pregnancy, if it's an excessive problem, it means they're probably deficient in some chromium, maybe in folic acid, maybe in some of the B complex. And it becomes an addiction. That's one of the reasons that the artificial sweeteners are so bad, because they increase the need, the desire for the body to want more of the same stuff.
Okay. And is there any validity to us saying, you know what, if we're craving ice cream, that maybe there's a real need for that in our body?
Well, probably not.
Okay. Next question. We have one of our class asked about group therapy. We were talking about meeting with someone to help us with, let's say, talking about depression. What about Holocaust survivors and those kinds of individuals in a group therapy? Is there any validity to talking with a group of people who have the same kind of problem or the same
Properly
situation?
done, it can be.
There you go.
It really needs someone with
class.
a lot of experience and training to do it properly.
Okay. Dr. Norm Shealy, normshealy.com. His latest book, Living Bliss, Major Discoveries Along the Holistic Path. Class, if you'd like a copy, you can go to USA Prepares. You can go to normshealy.com. There are links right there. And above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you. Thanks so much, Dr. Shealy.